Speaking from the advanced manual, Speaking to Persuade, giving project number 4. Please help me welcome the very experienced and knowledgeable Scott Friedman.
This speech has a big preamble. It's about changing our foreign policy and the cost of conflict. But before we start, I have to assign the roles of the audience. I need somebody to play the President of the United States, because following this speech, there's going to be a question and answer period, and I need someone to fill that role and that perspective in asking questions. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, who would like to be the President of the United States?
I would.
Are there any lawyers here that would like to be Attorney General?
Remember, you work for me.
Serve at the discretion of the President. You're appointed.
I'm innocent.
I also need somebody representing the military-industrial complex. One. At the end of the speech, I'm going to need all of you people to fulfill your roles and ask questions from those points of view. Now, the next part before we start the speech is, how is this all relevant to you? Why should you care about the defense budget and foreign policy and everything else? Well, I'll tell you. The defense budget is more than 20% of the national budget, and we have a huge budget deficit. And if we can become safer by spending less than the approximately $800 billion we spend now, and reduce the more than $500 billion a year budget deficit, they won't be looking to fill that budget deficit by taking away your interest deduction on your house, by further raising the retirement age for Social Security, by changing how Social Security is calculated to reduce your Social Security. So it does matter to you as Camarillo Evening Toastmasters what happens, because those things affect your life and the life of those that you love and care for. Now the proposal. And remember, you are the President's cabinet and advisors, as well as the leading members of Congress. So you are the leaders of the country. So you need to think about hearing from that point of view. The proposal. Conflict is expensive. I'm going to ask you today to consider some different points of view. We all agree we've got problems in the world. And I think we can all agree with Einstein when he said, we can't use the same thinking to solve our problems that we use to create them. So how many here are willing to have an open mind in considering a different point of view? Most of you. Notably not all of you. And I applaud your honesty, even if I can't appreciate your cooperation. 3 things that we can do that will increase the peace in the world, decrease the amount we have to spend on defense, and thereby further advancing our country, the world, and our budget. The first one is change the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of Peace. This will not be the first time that the name of the Department of Defense has been changed, because before it was the Department of Defense, it was the Department of War. And it was important enough at that time to change the name that they did it. And the reason was they wanted to change the focus and thinking of that military-industrial complex. They wanted it to focus more on defending and less on the concept that we wage war as an ongoing basis. For the same reason that we changed the name back then, changing the name now to the Department of Peace changes the focus to where the primary focus is, what can we do to create greater peace? Never underestimate that thought drives behavior. Changing the Department of Peace, the name to the Department of Peace, will have long-term beneficial consequences. And I'm not talking about changing any of the existing programs, only the name. The second thing that we can do to dramatically, over time, reduce the defense budget while making us safer is to quantify the cost of conflict, so that we can go to whoever we're in conflict with and honestly say, this is the cost to us of being in conflict with you, but this is the cost to you of being in conflict with us. And have the conversation where we say, it's true. We don't like you, we don't trust you, we don't believe in the same things as you. And that's okay. What can we do to incrementally reduce our level of conflict? What small step can we take to reduce the threat we feel from one another? Because in doing that, the price that each of us is paying will go down a little bit. And it has to be small because, let's be honest here, we don't trust you and you don't trust us either. So it has to be small enough that we're willing to take the chance. That's the third thing. So, 1, change the name from the Department of Defense to the Department of Peace. 2, quantify the cost of conflict. 3, engage those with whom we are in conflict, presenting the cost to each of us, and propose even the smallest step towards reducing that conflict so the cost to each of us will be reduced. I ask that you consider these things in the name of patriotism to our country. And one more thing I want to address, and that is that no solution is a solution if it disenfranchises other people. So those of you that are defense contractors who earn a living by manufacturing missiles, bullets, guns, fighter jets, aircraft carriers, this will all be structured, and we will work with you to take the skills that you have as this peace dividend comes about over time, and do everything possible to support you in using your expertise to become even more profitable, more successful with other products and services that are not used in military application. And we're very sensitive to that and want to know that the perspective is it's not a solution unless everyone's better off, and that includes military defense contractors as well. So we ask for your support in this. Now, I'll entertain your questions. Yes?
So you, on your second proposal, you talked about the quantity to quantify the cost of conflict.
Yes.
Do you think that the government should bribe countries to avoid conflict? And if so, how would you finance it?
I'm sorry, your question again, the country?
Should the government bribe countries to avoid conflict?
Should the government bribe countries to avoid conflict?
And if so, how would we finance it?
No. The question was, should the government bribe other countries to avoid conflict? And the answer is no. What we should do is we should be very clear that say, if this is the cost you're experiencing now of the conflict. The benefit that you're going to get by not having that conflict is you are no longer going to have to suffer those costs. So we're not bribing them. We're letting them participate in their own salvation. So no, we don't bribe anybody. That makes, it's completely counterproductive to do that. And it ignores the fact that they have everything to gain by just having peaceful relations, and that they are suffering by not having peaceful relations. It's a very good question. Yes?
Also related to your discussion about quantifying the cost of conflict, I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding how we can quantify the cost of conflict. For example, in situations where countries might be having, let's say, weapons of mass destruction, and in order to find that out, wouldn't we have to therefore spend a lot more on research and development? And if you could explain.
Okay, so the question was, in quantifying the cost of conflict, won't that increase our costs in order to quantify that?
Exactly, and what about the situations in which you may not be able to quantify that cost?
And what about the situations where we may not be able to?
Exactly.
Well, first of all, we do the best we can. In the United States, we've got RAND and we've got think tanks, and we have got already people that we are spending billions and tens of billions of dollars to do just that. As a brief example, take the chemical weapons in Syria. There was going to be there was a move to have a battle to remove them, and they came up with a non-military solution to that. It's all the time I really have, but I'd be happy at a later date to cover that question, because it's an excellent question, in greater detail. I appreciate your consideration of these things and look forward to your responses.